over the last week, there has been lots of doubt. I suppose that it is worthwhile saying that President Putin felt forced into these talks, and he's displayed little real enthusiasm for them. I think that he's focused upon military solutions rather than diplomatic solutions, even though there's a separate line running with President Trump.
So, what is President Trump's involvement in it all?
President Trump, if you like, keeps getting dragged back in. The Trump administration has been trying for the last 3 or 4 months to bring peace to Ukraine, and you recall a few weeks ago the Trump administration spoke about being tired of all this and perhaps leaving it to the warring parties. But President Putin has, if you like, dragged President Trump back in. And President Trump now says that no peace is possible without his involvement and his talking directly to President Putin. President Putin wants direct US-Russian talks because that elevates the status, or at least he thinks that elevates the status of Russia in the world's eyes. He doesn't believe that Ukraine exists, if you like. It is a non-sovereign entity. So from Putin's point of view, Trump's interest is essential.
Okay, so these talks, though, are significant, though, aren't they, despite the fact that the leaders won't be there, because they are the first direct negotiations between Russia and Ukraine since 2022, just after Russia launched its invasion.
They are significant in that sense, but what is unsure is whether this is a restart or, if you like, a false start. We're not sure whether this will lead on to anything more. It's quite plausible that next week these will have vanished off into the dustbin of history. On the other hand, of course, any talks that will possibly lead to a lasting peace are certainly very welcome, and the Ukrainians are certainly very keen on this.
So who'll be there from both sides then? What does low-level delegation mean?
Well, as I said, it's really a restart because it is pretty much the same people from March 2022, and at least last time they principally sat around and, if you like, talked about the ambitions Russia has, which are all fairly maximum goals. So at the moment, if these talks happen this afternoon, or rather this evening in Istanbul, the expectation is that the Russian side will simply restate their ambitions once more, and that this will not necessarily lead to, if you like, Russia and Ukraine taking a compromise view and working out a lasting solution.
What are the possible terms that they'll be discussing then? What's on the agenda?
It is back into Russia, if you like, keeping a sizable portion of Ukraine, keeping the Crimea certainly, but also of the provinces that they are currently partly occupying. They wish to take all of those provinces. So Ukraine would lose about 25–30% of its land from the pre-war starting point. Ukraine would have to be a neutral state. It would not be allowed to join the West or join NATO, and it would have very strict restrictions on its military force. President Putin is keen for Ukraine to be well within the Russian sphere of influence.
There are reports, Peter, from the Kremlin that Vladimir Putin has sacked his chief of land forces. Does that indicate dissatisfaction with how the Grand War is proceeding?
The Russians do change over their people relatively frequently, and this is more of perhaps a sideways shuffle. Although it is interesting that the Land Forces commander was in charge of the victory parade on May the 8th, and he now seems to have been shuffled sideways. So maybe the parade wasn't as much of a success as you might think. Russia has certainly taken extraordinary losses, and in particular this year has been very bad. But overall, and it's extraordinary losses of, roughly speaking, 1 million casualties, that is killed and injured, of Russian soldiers since the war started. Now, these are horrendous losses from our point of view, but clearly from the Russian point of view, they are acceptable.
Dr. Peter Layton, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.